Representative McElrath, Bradford, Baker, and ARP, House Bill 453, a bill to be entitled an act to protect against discrimination of human life. Johnson of North Carolina next.
Lady from Carteret, Representative McElrath is recognized to debate the bill, and the House will come to order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. I just want to thank my primary co-sponsors, Representative Kristen Baker, Representative Arp, and Representative Bradford, and I truly appreciate their leadership in this. I am going to be brief and leave time for questions, but I just want to say how honored I am to be on this bill, because I do believe that all babies, born and unborn, have intrinsic dignity and worth and should be protected from the practice of eugenic abortion. Eugenics is defined as the practice of arranging reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. Eugenics has been used in attempts to systematically erase entire populations of human beings due to inherent characteristics such as ethnicity, race, and yes, disability. It's a tragedy that continues today. Tiny babies with Down syndrome are denied their right to life due to an extra chromosome. The U.S. Supreme Court has been zealous in vindicating the rights of people who are even potentially subjected to race, sex, and disability discrimination. In fact, the inherent right against discrimination on the basis of race, sex, and genetic abnormality is protected by federal and state laws. And I was shocked to find out over 70% of these precious babies that get a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome never get a chance at life. Our state has a compelling interest to protect these children from discriminatory eugenic abortion. What the bill does, it amends the statutes and it prohibits abortion unless a physician knows that the woman is not seeking this abortion because of any of the following: the actual or presumed race or racial makeup of the unborn child, the sex of the unborn child it's already in our statute, the presence or presumed presence of Down syndrome. Section 1B would actually add whether the race, sex, or presence of and presumption of Down syndrome in the unborn child has been detected. And the doctor would have to report on that, as he does or she does, if there is an abortion that's after 16 weeks gestation. Science tells us that positive tests from a non-invasive prenatal screening test can be wrong almost 50% of the time. According to a recent study by New England Journal of Medicine, a mother's DNA can even alter these results. Life and death decisions are made on these results. We are missing so many miracles. As my colleague, Representative Bradford, says, these are not individuals with special needs. These are individuals with special abilities. 9 states have already prohibited abortions motivated by a child's disability. Every single child bears the unmistakable imprint of our Creator and is worthy of protection and support. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but Mr. Speaker, could we get the other primaries to say a few words first?
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Bradford, rise?
To speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. My comments will be probably repetitive for those of you that were in the committees that this bill has traveled, but for the others, I think it's worth noting that a few weeks ago, the 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals actually reversed a prior decision regarding a piece of legislation in the state of Ohio that's basically similar to the piece of legislation we're speaking about today. And the court released a statement on the ruling, and they basically said that they thought Ohio's interest in passing the law, as I would respectfully submit to you is the same here for us in North Carolina, was to protect the Down syndrome community from the stigma that it suffers from the practice of Down syndrome selective abortions. And it went on further to say to protect women who suspect Down syndrome from coerced abortions and to protect the medical community from unethical doctors, they wrote. So a few comments. My interest in this bill is unique to most certainly the Down syndrome community. Next Tuesday, I will have my 4th employee here as a legislator of an individual with Down syndrome. His name is Matthew. You will see him with me, hopefully a lot of the time. I have come to know individuals with Down syndrome as not having disabilities, but having very special abilities, which is what Representative McElrath was speaking about. And these are very capable, competent individuals who are ready and willing to work in our society. And this bill, I understand abortion is a very heated and partisan topic. This bill is very narrowly tailored to the issue of allowing a terminacy of a pregnancy strictly because of these 3 items, and Down syndrome being one of them. And to me, the idea of terminating a birth of a baby that never had a chance just because it has Down syndrome, and that would assume that all the screenings were positive and accurate, which isn't always the case, by the way, to me just is heartbreaking because these individuals have so much to give our society. I understand abortion is legal in our country, and so outside of the confines of these 3 items, we're not wading into that. That said, I would just further submit to all of you that this issue, I get a lot of emails about it already from both sides, and it's impassioned, and I would just encourage all of us to maintain the decorum that I know we can have here today. But I support the bill wholeheartedly because people like Matthew deserve to live. They deserve to have a chance. And I found it noteworthy that one of the disability advocacy groups came out against the bill, and I welcome all perspectives. I always have. I think that's what makes us good lawmakers, when we can put ourselves in the other shoes of the other side or the other party or the other perspective. And I think the day we lose sight of that, we probably should get out of these seats. And my only counter to their notion that this takes away from the real issue, which is fighting for those with disabilities, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think we can fight for people who are alive, who have disabilities, and I think we can be the voice for the babies who have been diagnosed with a disability like Down syndrome before they ever have a shot at life. And that is why I'm on this bill. So I encourage you to consider it and vote your conscience on it. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Wake, Representative Von Hafen, rise?
To speak on the bill.
The lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill does not address the needs of people with Down syndrome, nor does it really intend to end racial discrimination in North Carolina. Instead, this bill would prevent someone from obtaining an abortion if their doctor supposes or speculates that the reason behind their decision is because of the fetus's race or diagnosis of Down syndrome. Disability Rights North Carolina opposes restrictions on the bodily autonomy of any person, especially in the name of supporting people with disabilities. Forcing someone to carry a pregnancy to term against their will does absolutely nothing to address discrimination. This bill masquerades as policy supportive of members of the disability community, but instead of actually providing support for people who are differently abled, like ensuring adequate funding for Medicaid innovation waiver slots, which currently has a 15,000 person wait list, the bill exploits abortion stigma and the general public's lack of knowledge of both abortion and pregnancy. It uses inflammatory and manipulative language to further erode pregnant people's bodily autonomy in our medical system. It creates more stigma and shame around abortion care, and it targets people seeking abortion and the people providing abortion as unworthy of support or compassion. If we were truly authentic in our concern for people with disabilities, we would not co-opt the mantle of disability rights, but would instead focus on the true priorities of people with disabilities and their families, including ensuring access to health care, education, employment, and economic security, as well as the ability to parent with dignity. People with disabilities, including those with Down syndrome, have fought for decades against laws restricting their bodily autonomy, their right to do what they choose, go where they want, make their own decisions, and be who they want to be. We can and should accomplish all of those things without restricting anyone's right to make decisions about their own bodies. I hope you will take this into consideration and join me in voting no on this bill.
For what purpose does the lady from Wilson, Representative Cooper Suggs, rise?
To speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is built on the premise that women of color, particularly black women, seek abortions on the basis of the presumed race of the fetus. This is false. Oppressive narrative that women of color cannot be trusted to make our own decisions regarding reproductive rights. It also forces people of color to justify their decision to have an abortion to their doctor. This bill is part of a national effort to drive an inflammatory and misleading narrative about women who obtain abortions and the doctors who provide them. The rhetoric surrounding this bill is disrespectful and disingenuous. This law would do nothing to address the very real structural racism that black and brown parents and children face every day. To make matters worse, the sponsors have invoked the term eugenics in their justification for this bill. The use of this term, this debate, is incredibly offensive and inappropriate. The eugenics movement was and is about reproductive coercion. Not only would this bill not end the practice of eugenics, but it is in reality an extension of this form of oppression. This bill is keeping us from doing the real work to end race discrimination in North Carolina. The sponsors of this bill are neither working to address the maternal health disparities that black women face, nor are they working to improve the quality of the life of black children. While we waste time and taxpayer resources in an effort to control people's bodies and futures, bills like the Omnibus Act, Medicaid expansion, and the Healthy Pregnancy Act don't get the attention and votes that they deserve. I ask all of you to vote red on this bill. Thank you.
For what purpose, gentleman from Catawba, Representative Adams, rise?
Speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
This is eugenics. That's what it is, just what you said. And what I want you to do, ask you to do this. Look up War Against the Weak. Look on Amazon. It's a book. Edwin Black wrote it in 2012. It's about the eugenics movement at the turn of the century in the United States. It will set your hair on fire. What we did, it was the science of the time that we would help Darwin's theory along by using science to cull the unfit from our society. In North Carolina, the eugenics movement began in the early 1930s. It actually was established, the Eugenics Board was established in 1932, ruled unconstitutional, reformed in 1933, and it continued on until 1973. That practice in North Carolina was after the eugenics movement, which was a global movement, had discovered what Hitler was doing in Germany. And they had cooled off, they had subsided, but not in North Carolina. We picked it up and we used it in North Carolina for 40 years. I can't tell you how horrifying it is to hear the thought of culling the unborn because they don't suit our desires. I hope you'll look that book up because Edwin Black wrote the book War Against the Weak because he wrote a previous book which was IBM and the Holocaust. And when he was doing the research for that book in Europe, he kept finding periodicals about eugenics movement in the United States, but he couldn't find those periodicals in the United States. They were in Europe. He started doing deeper research, and what he found was that the whole thing had been buried. It's part of our history we just don't know anything about. And he was shocked at what he found. And you'll be shocked at what you read that he wrote.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Beaufort, Representative Kidwell, rise?
Speak on a bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we take into consideration children who are terminated in pregnancy due to Down syndrome or really any other reason, what I ask you to remember if you are a God-fearing, God-believing person is to look at many different versions of the Bible where they all say the same thing. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. God created each and every one of us and put us in the womb. It continues to tell me in the Bible that he knew who I would be before I was ever formed in the womb. Each and every one of us. If you're not a God-believing person, that's not going to help us any here today because you feel that that child in the womb is not worth that much more than the deer out in the field that I go hunting for in the fall because you're willing to terminate that child. When we do it due to Down syndrome, many times that's a misdiagnosis. Many, many times. I've heard over and over in the 20-plus years that I have personally worked with crisis pregnancy centers where the woman was told that her child had Down syndrome. Sometimes they were right, many times they were wrong. My own sister was told when she was pregnant with her daughter that the child would not survive, and it might even kill her, that she should have an abortion as soon as possible, that she had an ectopic pregnancy. Elizabeth Woolard today is 35 years old, born perfectly healthy, and a doctor said, you should have an abortion. Abortion is one of the plights of this world. We kill so many people every day and do it with so much impunity. Doesn't matter. It's just a chunk of flesh. Every child is worth everything. I hear so many times, if it saves one life, it's worth it. Why doesn't this apply when it comes to abortion? If it saves one life, it's worth it. The person who may have cured COVID within weeks may well have been aborted somewhere in the last 50 years. The person to cure cancer, the person to do so many other things, may have been summarily tossed in the trash because maybe they had Down syndrome, or maybe they weren't the right sex, or it just wasn't a convenient time. Oftentimes you hear about the mother or the family. They can ill afford this child right now. It's not the right time. It wasn't planned. They're not married. They have no means of support. Ladies and gentlemen, if we use that measure, Jesus Christ could have been terminated in an abortion because it wasn't the right time. They weren't married. That's a horrible thing, what we do. It is a sin. It is a blight on our society. I ask you to vote green on this bill.
For what purpose the lady from Wake, Representative Adcock, rise?
To debate the bill.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very disturbing to me when I hear my physician colleagues called coercive. And so that's going to be the main focus of my comments today about the bill, really about the chilling effect that this bill would have on the, absolutely have, on the patient-physician relationship. My words from my own self really can improve on those of North Carolina physicians who have dedicated their professional lives to the care of women and women during pregnancy. So I'm going to read comments from a letter that was written on behalf of the North Carolina OBGYN Society. Their concerns are shared by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the North Carolina Medical Society. And I quote, While we appreciate the genuine concern many legislators may have about protecting children with Down syndrome, our experience as clinicians is that women and families facing the difficult decisions that can come with a prenatal Down syndrome diagnosis require a great deal of counseling and support from their healthcare providers, families, clergy, and many other members of their community. Unfortunately, House Bill 453 would prevent women from having open and honest conversations with their doctor about their challenges and medical complications. It could prevent doctors from being able to share critical information that can help women and their families make reproductive health decisions with the privacy and the dignity they deserve. Based on our clinical experience, we believe government restrictions and mandates like those included in this bill will undoubtedly make the process of these patients' and their families' experience considerably more difficult. In addition, it would make providing the best and most appropriate care to these women much more complicated, if not impossible. As healthcare providers, this legislation would severely impact our ability to provide the standard of care for patients who would be subject to this bill. They go on to state, furthermore, in our view, the restrictions in House Bill 453 presume that the decisions women with a prenatal Down syndrome diagnosis face are straightforward and uncomplicated. In fact, Down syndrome often occurs with other complications that can impact a woman's healthcare decisions. The reality is that each mother and family facing these difficult decisions is different, and the decisions they have for continuing or ending a pregnancy after a fetal diagnosis is detected are myriad. And they conclude by saying, regarding the prohibitions on race selection in House Bill 453, we are not aware of any patient who ended a pregnancy on the basis of race. Rather, the decisions women make regarding their pregnancies are based on a wide range of personal experiences, beliefs, and healthcare choices. Imposing restrictions based on one or two specific criteria will simply make what are already complex decisions even more difficult for many of our patients to navigate. It's very upsetting and dangerous for us as a group of 120 and our 50 colleagues across the hall to think that we can interject ourselves into the exam room between physicians and patients and make decisions for them that only they are capable of making given their personal circumstances. I urge you both as a legislator, as a family nurse practitioner, and as a mother of two, to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Cabarrus, Representative Baker, rise?
To speak to the bill.
The lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. I want to go back to the comment about eugenics from my friend and Representative Cooper Suggs. The definition of eugenics comes from Greek, and it is come into being. So the use of this word for this discussion is highly appropriate. Eugenics, as defined, is a set of beliefs and practices intended to improve the genetic quality of a population. So once again, this terminology is extremely important to this discussion, and this bill is very limited to particular issues. This is not a bill on abortion in general, and I want to make that clear. This is about non-discrimination. And as a physician and child psychiatrist, I have spent my career dedicated to advocating for the most vulnerable. And I believe that we as a society are going to be judged on how well we protect those who may not or cannot speak up for themselves. And I would like to think that none of us here would deny the right to life to someone based on their sex, their gender, or their disability. And so I thank you for your consideration and urge you to vote yes on this bill.
For what purpose does the lady from Johnston, Representative White Rice?
To speak to the bill, please.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. I am in support of this bill because the greatest physician of all said, "For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy ways. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book all my members were written, which is in continuance were fashioned when as yet there was none of them." I am a health professional. I have been, I avoided in the days when abortions were first developed in our country legally. I was asked to coach and educate women on that option. As a person of faith, I chose not to do that. My job was threatened, and I continued to oppose and did not do that. For those who feel that that is okay, that is their personal decision. I do not try to put my faith on anyone else. But when you are in the womb and you have a diagnosis and you are not able to defend yourself, that is what this bill, to me, is about. It is our position and my position to defend those children, those infants that are in the womb and cannot fight for themselves. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Union, Representative R. Price?
To speak to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
House Bill 453, I wanted to sponsor because I believe in the principles of what this bill stands for. This bill prevents modern-day eugenics that eliminates people before birth because of their race or disability from Down syndrome. Overwhelming numbers of North Carolina citizens oppose abortion because a child will be born with Down syndrome. And that's a majority held across all demographics. The definition is given in the American Medical Association's Journal of Ethics, and one of their articles says this: eugenics, defined here as practices and policies designed to promote the reproduction of people with desired attributes and thus avert the reproduction of people with undesirable attributes. For example, people with disabilities. The idea that the world and the people in it would be better off if everyone were born healthy, that is, without defect, is the essential principle of eugenics, translated literally as well-born. From Planned Parenthood's own article, quoted in a subject called Sanger and Eugenics. They define eugenics as eugenics is a theory of improving hereditary qualities by socially controlling human reproduction. With Margaret Sanger, North Carolina has a stained and horrible history in participating in eugenics. Why should we allow North Carolina to continue discriminatory eugenics that eliminates children before birth because of race, sex, or Down syndrome? Haven't we learned how terrible it is for the state to participate or even allow modern-day eugenics to eliminate people before birth because of their race and disability from Down syndrome? Reprehensible eugenics does not stop at the forced sterilization of women, but must also extend to the abortion of children because they have Down syndrome or of a certain race. We're here discussing this issue today because of the amazing advances we've had in recent years in the area of prenatal genetic testing. Because of these technological advances, it is possible through very simple blood tests to tell the sex of a baby and whether they might have Down syndrome. We must decide whether we should allow these results to be used in a way that's discriminatory, to literally eliminate people on the basis of their sex, their race, or disability. We do not want to be that kind of society that not only discriminates but disposes of children because of the way they are created. North Carolina citizens don't want to be that kind of society either. In fact, it was actually the youngest respondents in the recent poll, the millennials and Gen Zs, who were the most likely to oppose the discriminatory Down syndrome abortions. Even a majority of people who identified as pro-choice were against Down syndrome abortions. In this time, we are so divided as a society on so many other issues. We are in agreement on this because we all know it's wrong. We know discrimination is wrong. We know you can't use this technology to discriminate in this truly horrendous way. House Bill 453 prohibits the doctor from performing an abortion if the doctor knows that the woman's reason is that she does not want a child with Down syndrome. As was discussed, there were several reasons for this that interrelated, but I did want to speak to one particular one about the coercive nature of this. It's indisputable that a number of medical professionals have advocated for Down syndrome abortions. As it states in the recent Sixth Circuit decision, academic literature confirms such practices within the United States medical community, including examples of health professionals who gave family inaccurate and overly negative information, perceivably intended to coerce a woman into a decision to terminate her pregnancy if the fetus is diagnosed with Down syndrome. That's in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. I will tell you that this issue is incredibly important because Down syndrome is a variable condition. The prognosis of people with the condition remains unclear. And this Journal of the American Medical Association Journal of Excellence goes on to say, this means that if a pregnant woman receives a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome, quote, she is unlikely to receive information about the level of physical and cognitive impairment a child would have. Diagnostic tests, even at their most accurate for conditions like Down syndrome, only tell pregnant women if the fetus does or does not have the specific chromosomal marker. They do not tell women about the severity or the breadth of impairments that may follow. One fetus with a diagnosis of Down syndrome could not survive pregnancy, whilst another child born with the condition could graduate from college. It is this complexity and variability, interesting, which means that some people, including health professionals, can hold ambiguous views and express various anxieties about prenatal screening and testing for Down syndromes, with some citing this uncertainty when claiming that screening could perhaps be considered eugenic practices, end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't escape the fact that when a woman's choice to abort her child because they know the child has Down syndrome or suspected to have Down syndrome, it eliminates the child in a discriminatory way. Our laws on discrimination prevent that. I ask for your support on passing this bill.
For what purpose lay from Wake, Representative Adcock writes.
To debate the bill a second time.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. I just cannot sit here and hear my physician colleagues called coercive, to be told that they make judgments about their patients and their patients' healthcare decisions when that is not their job and that is not their calling. I want to share with you some additional comments from the letter that was sent to all of us, from physicians who do this for a living, this bill would discourage patients from communicating fully with us about their health care needs and priorities. A physician's role is to provide the information our patients need to make informed decisions, not whether you like that information, not whether you even wish to say it, but because that patient deserves it. Those were my words. A prenatal fetal diagnosis can have a range of effects, and it is important for families to have all questions answered to the extent possible, not just the ones the doctor wishes to answer, not just the ones the patient may think to ask, but all questions should be answered. Doctors have the responsibility to provide information women need to make informed decisions, including all the options available to her family, then support her and what she decides is best for herself based on her values, creed, belief system, and assessment of the best course for her family. HB453 would require physicians as providers to attempt to discern the basis for our patients' healthcare choices, to determine whether those decisions are consistent with the provisions of this legislation, and to determine whether we, as healthcare providers, should or can recommend a particular course of treatment. And in closing, I would just like to say that even though some of the folks who have spoken today have said this issue is not about abortion in its totality, it's only about these certain things, when you start going in and nipping and tucking about the right of a woman to have a safe and legal procedure, which is what abortion is, you are going to the heart of the matter of abortion. Thank you.
For what purpose the gentleman from Nash, Representative Galliard, rise?
To debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, when I was first elected, got a handwritten note from someone that was formerly in the General Assembly. He's also served as Secretary of Commerce. And he said, man, congratulations on your election. One of the best things about being in the General Assembly are the people you're going to meet. You're going to meet some of the finest people. They'll be lifelong friends. He was right. People I caucus with, the people that I talk with, I already consider them lifelong friends. And then he said, the worst part of being in the General Assembly is that every once in a while, you're going to have that conscious vote. You're going to have that vote that you're going to have to vote for, and you know the bill stinks. But your conscience won't let you vote no. That's the bill I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at this bill that's just a bad bill, but my conscience as a pastor won't let me vote against it. But it's a bad bill. First of all, it is the height of insensitivity to label it eugenics. The doctrine that Nazis used to justify slaughtering Jews, and you want to label a bill that. Eugenics. The very practice that's used not to keep women, not to abort babies, but the practice that's used to keep African American women from even having children. Your solution to poverty, sterilization. Oh, and by the way, I think this is the same legislature that suddenly is talking about history, the history of eugenics, the history of what we've done in North Carolina, the history that has happened relative to race in our country. And yet, this same legislature says, oh, let us not dare teach kids that history. What a hypocrisy. What a height of insensitivity to people of color. That this brings us back to the Human Betterment League. That moment, you remember that, my history buffs, the Human Betterment League, where black people were called morons, where poor people were told they were not worthy of being able to be a parent. This bill is bad, first of all, because of the titling of it, eugenics. Life is precious. Every single person in this chamber, I believe, believes life is precious. And abortion is tragic. And I don't think there's anyone on this chamber floor that doesn't think abortion is tragic. What must a woman be struggling with to go through that moment of choice to be able to end a life? And it seems like no matter how long we're here, every session, the dashboard is going to light up like a Christmas tree at Christmas time with new legislation that's not really about good legislation. It's about power. It's about politics. It's about manipulation. It's about division. And here we are, another one of those bills. As a pastor, I've held babies a month old while they took their last breath. I've counseled couples in the ICU while the doctor extubated their child and while they had to breathe for the child because they knew the child wasn't going to breathe anymore. I've watched doctors who are heroic, who do everything possible that technology allows them to do to be able to keep a baby alive. And then every once in a while, in the midst of that moment, the doctor has to look at those parents and say that maybe, just maybe, comfort and compassion is going to be best for your child. And the problem with these abortion bills, every single one of them, is that we assume every situation is the same. And every situation is not the same. So, to be clear, this is not about life. This is not about racial equity. This is not about disability rights. This is a divide and conquer bill. This is a bill of desperation. This is a bill that says the only chance we've got to hold on to power is to divide people. After all, isn't that the playbook? Let's divide everybody, pro-life, pro-choice. Let's divide everybody, black and white. Let's divide everybody, black lives, blue lives. Let's divide everybody, conservative, liberal, patriot, progressive. So here we are playing out the playbook. Labels divide us. And this is the irony of this bill. The irony of this bill is that most of the people who think this is a good bill wouldn't even wear a mask to protect people's lives. This is the irony of this bill. The irony of this bill is that most of the people who will vote for this bill, most of them have no evidence.
Representative Geyer, the gentleman will refrain from disparaging other members of this assembly, or the gentleman will yield the floor.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Every time we protect life in the womb and fail to pass legislation that protects life in the world, then we are failing the life in the womb. Embedded in this bill somewhere is a baby. This baby somewhere is in this bill. And eventually this baby will leave the womb. And this baby, according to this bill, will wind up in the world. And when this baby winds up in the world, if it's a girl, guess what? She's going to wind up living in a state that won't even pass an equal rights amendment. This baby that's embedded in this bill, when she is finally born, when she finally winds up going to school, guess what? She's going to go to a segregated school. You know why? Because we have economic segregation in our public school systems. And then if she
Mr.
winds
Speaker,
up with a
point of
job,
order. For what purpose of the gentleman from Wayne, Representative Bell Rice?
Would the gentleman keep his remarks on the bill at hand, not hypothetically situations that may or may not happen?
Mr. Speaker, the bill is about life. If the baby's going to live, they're going to have a life.
So, Chair is going to rule on this. Now, this is a bill having to do with when abortion is allowed or not allowed. It doesn't have to do with other things. The chair's given the gentleman a good bit of leeway, but has to bring it in about the bill. Try to avoid other things. I know the gentleman's emotional about this, but let's try to bring it in about the bill, please.
There is a link, Mr. Speaker. There is a link between abortion and poverty. When this child is born, they're going to join the ranks of the 1 in 5 children that are already living in poverty. I'm a whole life Democrat. I value every life. Life in the womb, a child that is an immigrant, a person on death row, a pregnant woman, a veteran trying to get medication, every member of the LGBTQ community. At what point do we say as a General Assembly, we value every human life? According to this bill, we see a black baby that's a full human life. But when this black baby becomes a black man that's chased by a cop, it no longer has a full human life. This baby is going to grow up.
Mr. Speaker, point of Representative Gallagher. The gentleman will retain his remarks to the issue at hand, or the chair will take the floor from the gentleman. So.
Every human life deserves to be treated with dignity. What I would hope is that we will find a way to legislate to protect the right of women to choose and the right of unborn fetuses. We need to do everything we can to offer real choices to women: adoption, financial support, better health care. My colleagues have quoted the Bible. I'm somewhat trained to do that. Is God pro-choice or pro-life? Deuteronomy chapter 30. I place before you life and death. Choose life. The reality of it is we should not be wondering if God is on our side. We should be seeking to be on God's side. Nothing's wrong with protecting unborn lives, but something is wrong with not fixing our healthcare system. Something is wrong with ignoring systemic racism. Something is wrong with denying economic empowerment to all families. So this is a bad bill, and I hope eventually we can protect all lives.
For what purpose does the chair's was going to allow Representative McElrath, who's the bill sponsor, to speak as a final speaker? So chair does not intend to recognize anybody else unless I see a light right now. All right, with that, lady from Carteret, Representative McElrath, is recognized to speak on the bill a second time, then we're going to vote.
Oh, sorry. That's exhausting. I just want you to know that I love all of you. There is no racism in my heart or no search for power. I do this for people like Jaden. Jaden's a 9-year-old that was at each of our committee meetings. And yesterday in Judiciary 1, she sat while she listened to the debate on both sides. And she wrote out a note, which I would like to close with today, to read to you and let you know this is what this is about. This is about these special children who bring so much joy to their families, to the community, to their classmates. This is about giving them a chance to live to the 60 years they can live to. Please listen to Jaden. My name is Jaden, and I have Down syndrome. I know in my heart that I am God's child, and I love my life. I like to tell people about what I can do. I can draw, play piano, and I can do all the things you can do. I like math, reading, spelling, and grammar. I like swimming, and my favorite stroke is the breaststroke. Thank you. This is what this is about.
Question for the House is the passage of House Bill 453 on its second reading. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative Pittman on the floor. Clerk will lock the machine, record the vote. 67 having voted in the affirmative and 42 in the negative. House Bill 453 passes its second reading without objection, will be read a third time.
General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Question for the House, passage of House Bill 453 on third reading. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. House Bill 453, having passed third reading, will be sent to the Senate.